Hello everyone, we're about to read Parshas Truma, and this parsha talks about the Mishkan, the tabernacle that was built by the Jewish people. And the Torah lists off all the materials which were dedicated to the Mishkan, and what's interesting is that the Avnei Shoam and the Avnei Miluim, which were the stones which sat in the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, they're listed last. And that's odd because they're the most precious materials. They sat in the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol and they helped him communicate with God. And they're listed last. And this is strange. What's the reason for this? And the Or Chaim HaKadosh, who is well known for his commentary which appears in the Mikros Gedolos edition of the Chumash, he explains, well, let's not forget how these stones were dedicated to the Mishkan. What happened was that the Nesiim, the princes of each tribe, when Moshe Rabbeinu asked the Jewish people to dedicate the materials, they waited it out. And they said to themselves, you know what, let's see what's needed. Allow the Jewish people to bring the materials, and whatever's left over, we'll dedicate. What happened? The Jewish people started bringing materials, and they didn't stop. And they brought, and they brought, and they brought, and eventually there was a surplus. And there was nothing for the Nesiim to dedicate to the Mishkan. And they felt very bad. And eventually, they dedicated these Avnei Shoam and the Avnei Miluim, these stones which sat in the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. And it says that Or Chaim, the Torah is teaching us that although you might think that these were the most precious materials, in a certain way, in God's eyes, they were the least precious. Because these princes had the opportunity to demonstrate their love for God, and they didn't do it because they waited. And if they would have done it immediately, they would have had eternal merit. But they waited, and that eternal merit, that opportunity to demonstrate their love for the mitzvah and their love for God, was lost forever. What's the lesson for us? We're presented with opportunities for mitzvahs all the time. Whether it's tzedakah, whether it's an act of kindness, to visit somebody, to take care of somebody, to help somebody. And oftentimes we'll stop and we'll think to ourselves, you know what? Let somebody else do it. Maybe our contribution is not needed. And even if we end up doing it in the end, a few days later, a few weeks later, we think to ourselves, well, nothing really mattered because it didn't matter that we waited, that it schlepped out, because eventually we did it. And the answer is no, it did matter. We lost out. Right? The person who was in need, they might have gotten it, they received what they needed, but we lost out because we had an opportunity to jump, to do it right away. If we're able to do it, to immediately say yes, and we didn't, and we waited. And that opportunity is lost forever. This applies to relationships as well. Sometimes, imagine, my wife, she has two things around the house that she needs fixed. One's a very important thing. It's a leak that needs to be fixed. And the other thing is sort of trivial and minor, perhaps, not to all women, but let's just assume hanging up a picture. And my wife asked me to do both tasks. The picture, I do right away. The leak schleps out for a few months. I don't get around to it for weeks, months. What's more precious to my wife? What does she appreciate more? There's no question that in a certain way, she appreciates the picture that was hung right away. Because immediately when she asked me, I did it. And I demonstrated my love for my wife, and that I care, and that what she asks is important to me. Have a wonderful Shabbos.